Welcome back, everyone. I can't believe we're here already. After months of planning and so much engagement, we are in the final session of the Global Summit on Student Affairs and Services. Yesterday was a busy day. We held our 2 interregional hub meetings where conversations were very engaging, and it was great to meet so many new people. We also had our student panel, a very interesting, diverse, and accomplished group of students who have done so much work locally and globally in responding to the Sustainability Development Goals. As it is a new day, and we may have some new people joining us live today, I would like to again acknowledge Toronto, Canada, the virtual host location of our meeting, and where I sit as the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Senecas, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, known to many as North America, and we are grateful to work on this land. Many of our participants reside in countries that have been shaped by their colonial pasts, and I encourage those individuals to continuously reflect on the impacts of colonialism and its intersection with the inequities and actions that are highlighted throughout the SDGs. We now have an exciting opportunity to engage with in a Q&A session with the amazing presenters who provided pre-recording presentations. To help facilitate this process, I would like to invite Leanne Pena and Abigail Smith to join us to facilitate this portion of the meeting. Leanne and Abigail, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Hello from Thessaloniki, Greece at Perotis College and the American Farm School. Abigail, would you like to say hello to?
Hi, everyone. Welcome from the UAE. I'm at American University of Sharjah. So nice to have everyone at our last session with us.
So Abigail and I had the pleasure of working with all the presenters, going through the proposals, accepting the proposals, and working with everyone on the technology pieces. And we have 24 really fantastic presentations that I hope you've all had the time to watch on our YouTube channel. After previewing all the presentations, to make this discussion more fruitful so you can get the most out of it, we decided to organize them into 5 different themes. We have a COVID-19 theme, technology, sustainability, transitions and support, and engagement and outreach. Abigail, would you like to talk about how the breakout rooms will work?
Sure. Thank you, Leanne. So now you have the opportunity to ask any questions and get the answers from the awesome presenters who submitted, their work to us that they've been doing either throughout the past year or, that they've been doing for the past couple of years. So as Leanne said, there'll be 5 rooms and you'll be randomly assigned to these 5 rooms by our hosts. And then you'll have 10 minutes in each rooms. And don't worry, you don't have to look, set a timer on your phone. We will remind you when the time is up and you can just hop to the next room. And, if you want to stay as long as you can, you want to, but we do encourage you to, visit all the rooms, listen to the conversation, listen to the answers of the presenters, and get some answers, because you never know. Even if you didn't watch the presentation, you might still learn something new. So we're going to head over to the presentations now, and everyone's going to be in a different room, and then we'll see you after.
Hope you enjoy the presentations and the Q&A with our great presenters.
Hello, I don't have the breakout icon on the bottom of my screen.
I don't either as well.
Thank you.
Now,
Same here.
Same here. I seem to have one, although I'm a facilitator.
Don't worry, you'll be assigned rooms and you'll receive a prompt to be able to join one.
Thank you.
I don't receive any invitation for the breakout room.
I also have not received invitation for the breakout.
It should be coming shortly. Just give it about 2 more minutes or so.
Okay.
Thank you.
I
Thank
believe
you.
people can choose which breakout rooms they want to go into. Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone. I hope everyone had a really great session and got to have some really engaging conversations. I know certainly the ones that I've been part of, I floated between a few other rooms and really, really great Q&A and engagement. So I hope you all felt the same way. So I also want to thank Leanne and Abigail so much for working with all the presenters and loading everything up on YouTube and getting all the bio information and preparing this this Q&A session as well. So thank you so much for that. And again, a huge thank you to everyone who submitted presentations. We were reflecting a little bit earlier today that this is the first year, this is the 5th Global Summit, but it's also the first time that we had a strong series of presentations. And I think thinking about the format and how we were able to deliver those asynchronously, it was, I think, a really, really great both experiment and opportunity. So I really did enjoy all the perspectives that were offered in reviewing the presentations. So now we're going to shift focus a little bit and do share back at this Global Hub the discussions that came from the interregional hubs that took place yesterday. So with that now, I'd like to invite Andrea, and there's a whole team of people who are going to be presenting from the hub for the interregional hub for Middle East, Asia, and Oceania. And so I'm going to pass it over to Andrea to start this off.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much for this evening. Hello. We've had a lot of fun in our regional hubs. So we had some great conversation when we were just our smaller region, although geographically large, with Asia and Oceania. And then most recently, Asia, Oceania, and the Middle East joined together to make what I think, when we cut the world in half, the West, which was very odd for me coming from Scotland. I was all disorientated originally, but we had a tremendous discussion, and I'm really hoping that our share back with you this evening is going to give you a sense of what we talked about. And to do that, then I'm very grateful to our collaborators, our co-conspirators, our facilitators, and everyone that took part in our activities and our discussions, but in particular to, of course, Lisa and Abigail and Leanne. And we had many, many others. And this evening, or this morning, today, then we're going to ask Beryl and Carlito and Lon and Matt and Ben to also help us in sharing back, so that you get a sense of the many voices and the diversity of our discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to share the screen and then take us through, and with our colleagues, take us through where we got to. So hopefully that works. Let me just, sorry, my apologies. There we are. Okay, so in terms of our sharing, then just broadly, and I'll introduce us before I hand over to Beryl. Then we were many, many different people. There were roughly around 43 people in our first session, and around 25 in the second session. So lots of different examples of how universities were using the SDGs in student affairs and student services, and in particular embracing environmental and sustainability practices and climate action. There was no clear realization that what we were doing was so different. And of course, you see the quote there from our European colleague, which was we had a bit of a European influence, largely because Lisa crossed over between the Middle East and Europe. So we were grateful for some of their insights as well. But overall, the group as a whole was energized by some of the stories that you'll hear about shortly, but some of the stories that we had around adopting the SDGs as a framework for strategic planning in particular, and a framework of planning for how we might involve our community and engagement in those areas. So I'm now going to hand over to Beryl, who will take us through the next few slides.
So, hi, Andrea. This is Eva, Beryl's colleague. I wonder if everyone can hear me.
Thanks, Eva.
Okay, awesome. So I just want to get a thumbs up because is my mic working properly? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, lovely. Okay, so I just want to very quickly share what my interregional hub has put together. A lot of people coming from different countries, including Philippines and of course from my hometown, Hong Kong. And let's start with Philippines. They shared that they are actually working with student organizations to develop and implement programs related to SDGs. A perfect way to start because when the students, we raise student awareness, and that's where we create impact from bottom to the top. And at HKUST, when we work with mainly community engagement and outreach, and specifically with my team, we are mapping the learning opportunities against the SDGs. So we are not only just doing service learning, but we're also connecting community needs to the SDGs, as well as giving students local examples of international goals as well. And so they see a localized version of what that SDG goal is trying to address. So that's where we create some report and they find a relevance in the sense that, oh, this is where I should be part of the change. So that's why we use the SDGs in our work to connect students to what is happening in the real world, from Hong Kong to the world, basically. And on to other countries, on the next slide, they've also shared from the Middle East, they have also shared that they have used the Times Higher Education ranking and share their achievements in sharing their research and their work in promoting UN SDGs, even though the student affairs and services operations programs are not directly linked to the SDGs yet. And this is also a similar case in Hong Kong as well, actually. So, in Australia, from the University of the Sunshine Coast, they are embedding sustainability into their academic curriculum, and also using the globalization approach and work integrated learning into their curriculum as well. So a similar way of giving meaning to the SDG goals to the students as well. So this is why it also ranked high in the THE ranking, impact ranking as well. And also from the Philippines, they plan to strengthen the awareness on different levels for the 17 goals. And right now they're focusing particularly on SDG 3, good health and well-being, raising the mental health awareness, SDG 4, developing the equality education, as well as for developing sustainable cities. And in Macau, they have launched programs specifically aligned with SDGs, particularly focusing on environmental sustainability performances and also their social impact. So they have actually also mapped a lot of programs related to community outreach and partnerships under social impact program. And they have also focusing on inviting students, faculty, and administrators basically all work together in their environmental sustainability program to promote co-creation as well in that sense. And on to our next slide. These are some of the websites that we encourage you to visit because from New Zealand and Massey University, they have actually created an infographic that represents their achievements in supporting the SDGs. Earlier on, we talked about University of St. Joseph from Macau, about their programs, and then the Middle East University of Bahrain on their achievements, particularly in SDG 1, Zero Hunger. And of course, from our hometown, HKUST Connect, as well as University of Sunshine Coast, Australia. So welcome you all to check out the links. I wonder whether we'll be able to put the links in the chat later on so that everyone, yeah. So I'll put them as I invite my next partner to share the next slide. Thank you so much, everyone. Back to you, Andrea.
Thank you. Look, I wonder whether Carlito is here, but I was going to invite Carlito to speak to the next two slides if you're here, Carlito. Nope. Oh, you are. Hi.
Hello. For the setback in education and the linkages, I think in the hubs that I joined in, what is good about the goals are shared by everyone. I think this is how I summarize it. The goal encourages partnership among different groups. Like for example, in a particular country, all the sectors in that country could work together and heighten this partnership, which I think that's one of the goals of SDGs. And then when it comes to the mental, the linkages, like in our school or in the national organization that we have in the country, like PAPSAS, our national president is here. I think it's a very clear example of that linkages that we are, I would say, we are aligning with what IASAS is putting as a thrust among student services. That's one thing, because our national organizations, I think we have around 150 school members. And if we could really push for this adoption of the goals as one of the thrust of IASAS, then maybe this linkage would work really for the different schools. I think that is what I got from the sharing. And then regarding the mental health, of course, this is one thing that I heard from the different sharings then, that the goals certainly provide direction and focus. Like, for example, mental health of our students, which remains as a top priority. This has been shared by many of us. And that's one clear example what these goals provide for us. It gives us certain focus and direction, especially now after the COVID-19. That would be one that we need to. I could only share, to add to all of this sharing, the practice that we have in the school, our guidance and counseling group, and that is similar for the different schools in the university. This is one of those teleconference, tele-counseling. Of course, you have to look into the conditions of this. So that's one thing that I would like to share, that among us, the goals provide a certain focus. But, there were also some sharing, like, could this be a campus culture for everyone, that we have all these SDGs? I shared earlier that we really have to consider the location of the school. The typologies of the school. Like we have state universities, local universities, and private universities. It's very important that we know all of these things. So we can only focus on a certain goal if we know what really is the vision mission of our school. And I share that with everyone. And I think, yes, that is not mine anymore, Mom. I think I have only slides 7 and 8.
Andrea, you're muted, love.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. Technology issues. We're going to move on. Pardon me, I don't know what's happened now. We're going to actually now move on to, and thank you for that, Carlito. We're going to move on to Marlon. Marlon, if you could take us through the next couple of slides. I'm conscious that we're going to share between yourself and Matt and Ben before we close up. Okay. So Marlon, if you could take us through slides 9 and 10, thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Andrea. Actually, this global summit opens a lot of realities and challenges about the pandemic, and this challenge has been passed on from generation to generation and maybe remain unresolved. So most of the countries became more aware about the problem when we introduced the Sustainable Development Goals. So different efforts have been evident to achieve some of the objectives of SDGs. When we try to analyze these items for the slide 9, I think this is more on the learning poverty. When we talk about learning poverty in educations, that really affects human capital in any countries of the world, especially in the Asia Pacific, so like the Philippines, so one of the developing countries in the world. So the pandemic opened revealed a lot of challenges, especially in terms of inequality in accessing in terms of financial support and scholarship, and somehow in some of the developing countries, digital divide is very evident. So through our conversation, we suggested to have to loan laptops, and maybe the universities can really strengthen the Wi-Fi connection, especially in most of developing countries. The second one is this conversation also opened important issues like the inclusion, gender, and safety spaces. So we were talking about this as a center of the conversation. Another item we were able to discuss under the SDG 10 is international students' fees must be reduced. We were financially affected by the pandemic, so a lot of suggestions and appeal should really focus on helping students in terms of finances. Next slide. Next slide, please. And for the last slide is, I think we should all, sorry, can you please go back to the slide 10? This is not my part. Thank you. And post-COVID world gave us an opportunity for different online activities. And we as a student affair practitioner should also expose our students in more productive webinars that can supplement different learning. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lon. Okay, now we're going to move over to Matt, who's going to take us through the next few slides. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Andrea. Yeah, so I think part of our conversation was about the transition. Really, looking at it, it's not like there's pandemic time and non-pandemic time where we might just go back to all in-person activities, but there's actually some things that were effective and would remain effective that we would continue to do online. And it might, I think when technology can be obviously a barrier if there isn't access to internet or to the devices to be able to access it. But if there is, that can actually be increase the accessibility and increase the reach of programs and services that are out there. And so, I think there's an opportunity as we discussed, really looking at engaging hybrid programming where there are, asynchronous and synchronous elements and there are online and in-person components that can really engage students. And so there's really an opportunity there to focus on those things, particularly around the SDGs. Next slide. The other thing we talked about is, and I can speak, so I'm in Qatar, and Qatar itself is doing quite a bit around SDGs, but for our Campus in Qatar Foundation, at least from my perspective, it might be going on at higher levels, but this hasn't been integrated a whole lot. And I think there's a lot of, we talked about just the different places we all are as institutions, as individuals, as departments, functional areas, whatever it is, around SDGs and engaging with them. And so there's some opportunities here to learn from each other. I think one is, thinking about the programming and the things that are already being done, some of the examples that were shared earlier in the slides of institutions that are doing some amazing work around SDGs and assessing those and what is the impact. I think being able to share that is really helpful benchmarking, but also encouraging to institutions that may want to adopt that. And I think other things we looked at is in terms of solutions is how do you get started if your institution isn't doing this, or if your department isn't doing this? Thinking about interdisciplinary approaches, curricular and co-curricular, how to merge those, pulling in academic components that may bring this to life more for students. I think one more thing on that last one. And then the other thing was, it can feel really big when you look at all of the SDGs and think, oh my gosh, where do we even begin? Sometimes it can be helpful just focusing on one, and that might be something that your institution or your department is already focusing on in other ways, but just hasn't linked it specifically to SDGs. I'll go on to the next slide, please. And focusing on one can really obviously dedicate efforts and energies in that way, but also can be more manageable. But we really talked about, as a starting point is thinking about it as student affairs and services, how can we incorporate this in our strategy and planning? Most organizations have a strategic plan that they're aligning with, hopefully with their division, with their institution, the institution with the government perhaps. But a lot of it is talking about that initial alignment. What are we already doing that might be connected to SDGs? And that makes it easy. Then it's more about matching the language and aligning the terminology for the work that's already being done, and then assessing, adding the additional maybe learning outcomes or KPIs that might be assessed about an SDG. And part of this is really thinking, obviously the SDGs are thinking very broadly at the global level, but thinking about locally, what is most relevant? I can say for Qatar, sustainability is very important. And so I think as we look at this, I think one thing I might advocate for is focusing on that, because that's already incorporated in many of the things that we're doing, and it might be a helpful SDG to start with. I think there's some other community partnerships that can be really helpful here too. So we've listed a few. These are just kind of resources that institutions or student affairs and services professionals may connect to that will really help support their work, but also maybe even advocate for a focus on SDGs. One example was thinking about universities that are government or state run, inviting private schools to join in campaigns that they're doing. So some institutions, really finding any institution that's doing well in that space and connecting with them and seeing how you might partner with them to really just fold into what they're already doing. And then it's more of coming on board with all of the things, programs, services, ways of engaging students that may be a helpful collaboration. We also talked about the sustainable development and solution networks. These are by region or by countries, and I believe I had the link for that too. Maybe we can share that. But this can be really helpful just to see what's already out there. What are organizations doing in your region or in your country that you might learn from and adopt or partner with? And this is where the linkages are so important, making sure that through this kind of mutual support at the country, organization, and individual level, it makes this work more impactful and more meaningful and easier, because you're really supporting each other, and it is truly a communal effort. We also talked about engaging the wider community, not just, students are obviously a part of this, but getting other departments involved. We really, as I said, talked about how do you even, what's the first step that you would even do to get this to happen on your campus? And one of the things we talked about is really just raising awareness about it, finding out who's also excited about this. Through this and hearing the student panel was so inspiring. There's so much energy there, and they're such a major stakeholder, but to be able to connect with the larger group. And then finally, really looking at organizations that are working on different SDGs, really looking for the things we already do in student affairs and services, connecting students to opportunities. And so finding those organizations and connecting students there, that they have an opportunity to, there's already a student club, for example, to connect them with an organization that's working in that space in an SDG. So I think through all of these solutions, it was really to kind of help us to conceptualize it and think about how we might really truly bring this to life, not only for our students, but for ourselves, and then ultimately so we can be influential with the leadership of our institutions.
Thanks for that, Matt. Look, we've just got a couple of more insights to share with you before we close out, and I'll just ask Ben to close us out, please, Ben, with the last couple of slides, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you, Matt. And hi, everyone. This is Ben from the University of St. Joseph in Macau. Following some of our solutions presented by Matt, I'm going to talk a bit more. We talked also about the campus engagement that we encourage the students and the student clubs to be sustainable, to meet the SDGs, and to raise their awareness of students on the SDGs, like especially SDG 4 and SDG 17, 2, etc. Another thing we talk about is about the documents and how we can pay attention and have some to document on what each country has done in support of the SDGs. And there are two dimensions. The first is to document on our own country has done. And other dimension is to document on the other countries and to have some of comparison and contrast. And other thing we talk about is like ISIS may work with the others, and for example, our own institutions to get the benchmark information, because some of our institutions may not be too familiar with the SDGs, or okay, we are familiar with SDGs, but we don't know how to like to what extent we can like improve or to benchmark. So I think ISIS may work with the institutions on the benchmarking. And finally, the SAS may have further professional development, which may be helpful for any one of us and also our colleagues. First of all is to have some example. There are three dimensions. The first dimension is to have some examples and guidance on how the student affairs staff can advocate for SDGs to their institution leadership. This is the first level. It's like home institution level. It's a personal level. And the second dimension is the networking and partnership between the different institutions, no matter the national level or the international level, to advance goals and gather universities to share best practices, good practices, and how we may implement programs and services to achieve the SDGs better. And finally is the global level. That's why we are having the global summit. Is that ISIS may contribute to provide education on SDGs to all of the members and the other stakeholders. So this is my part, and may I invite Andrea or Abigail to conclude our inter-regional presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Look, I'm conscious that we are absolutely out of time now, so thank you for your patience. This was us. This is our champions. These are the people in our regions, plural, that are going to be taking all of this forward and all of our learnings, and we look forward to the further discussion from here. So I'll stop sharing now, and thank you to all of our co-presenters.
Thank you, everyone.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Andrea. I was going to comment on the photo because I saw the photos yesterday, and really fun to see and great to hear all the work that's been happening in that interregional hub. So I'd like to now pass it over to both Tad and Gia, who are going to be talking from the Interregional Hub for Africa, Europe, North America, Caribbean, and Central America to talk about the discussions that took place at that meeting. Over to you, Tad and Gia.
Great, thank you so much, David. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, wonderful, great place to start. Yes. Gia, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and begin, and we're going to try to be as time sensitive as we can to leave time to wrap up. And also, a lot of our points were already illustrated by the first group so eloquently. So, but Gia, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, thank you, Tad. So my name is Jia Zheng. I am one of the regional communication coordinators from ISIS. And I also like to take this opportunity to thank all the participants who actively engaged in the conversations in the previous days. And just thank you so much again for taking the time and also sharing your perspectives and your experiences and engaging the discussion with us.
Thank you, Jia. And my name is Tad Cruz. I'm a member of the ISIS board. And I would also like to thank our regional hub facilitators, both Rob and Morella, who serve as our lead facilitators, and our fellow co-facilitators, including Tanya, as well as all of our participants that Jia just mentioned. So we're going to kind of jump into the deep end, so to speak. And what we want to start out with was kind of reflecting on all the Sustainable Development Goals collectively. And a lot of our conversations, there was a lot of alignment of or connectivity and discussions about how one links to the other. For the summit, we were focusing primarily on SDGs 4, quality education, 5, gender equality, 10, reduced inequalities, and 13, climate action. So that's just where we're going to kind of start our conversation today and recapping what we discussed. One thing I want to say before I pass it on to my colleague is our conversations were great. I know one of our breakout rooms included people from each of our continents, and I think 5 or 6 different countries. So there was a really diverse set of perspectives shared. Sounds like very much similar to the other interregional hub. Jia?
Yeah, so I think in our conversation, in the dialogue that was addressed at multiple points, that how these 4 goals are connected with many of the other SDGs. So we just want to highlight as well, the connectivity is so important as we are hoping to serve the whole student and also serving the communities and institutions or different organizations that we're in. Thank you, Ted. So one thing that, as during the conversation that we've had, there are many surprises and reactions that came up. So we just want to highlight a couple of things that came up through our conversations. So the first thing that, we touched upon was during the conversation that after hearing the keynote and also the presentations, many participants mentioned that SDGs are similar, are familiar to us, and then some are new. But what that means is folks are already doing the work that closely ties into the SDGs in different ways and different aspects, but we're calling it different things. So for example, graduate attributes, or global citizenships, social justice and equity and inclusion. So all of these things are the work that we're already doing. But perhaps some folks are, they're familiar with SDG, but not necessarily addressing them directly or using the exact language or definitions in our work. So with that said, there are many opportunities for us to incorporate SDGs as we begin to focus on a more global approach. So it is really important that we're able to discuss these fluently and really using the language with others that we communicate with and we work with and partnership with as well. So that includes both within the student affairs department, but also within our institutions and within our organizations as well. So the other point that surfaced from the conversation is the digital divide. So the COVID-19 pandemic has really brought to light the inequities of accessing technology in different parts of the world. So for example, for one participant in our discussion mentioned that, for some students, they have abundant resources, support systems to really support them through this challenging times. But for other students, they might be sharing, one computer in their home with 13 people. So you can see how much of a gap there is when it comes to inequity in accessing technology. So also from an equity and access perspective, it really also reminds us of how important it is to look at the SDGs and really think about how can we use SDGs to support equity and accessing technologies when we work and support with the students. And the other point that was mentioned as well is, we also realize how there are inequities that exist in many countries. So especially when it comes to, when we talk with colleagues and from different regions as well. Another example that came up was the food insecurity that was a shared experience in both South Africa and Canada. So this was also highlighted in the student panel as well. So again, it really reminds of how we are all in this together, you know, how interconnected we are when it comes to like coping with the pandemics for us as student affairs educators, but also when we support the students as well. So I'll pass it to Ted for the next slide.
Great, thank you. And so as you already heard, a lot of the things that, that our group discussed were things that were discussed in the interregional hubs, things that came through the keynote, through the student panel and so forth. And so one of the things that really was profound in our conversation was this first bullet point, and that the SDGs helped us strengthen kind of what we do. And I've heard a lot of colleagues of mine, especially in the Middle East, where I've had a lot of meetings, but even professionals around the world in past conversations, talking about how the value of student affairs has never been greater. That university presidents are saying, calling on a daily basis to say, wait, where do things stand? What do we need to do? So this idea that, you know, listening to the presentations, that the social justice lens is becoming more and more evident, not just with what happened with the Black Lives Matter movement and that went around the world around this time last year, or it started around this time last year, but kind of what can we do and how can we incorporate these SDGs in a more intentional way? We'll come back to that sort of intentional piece in a bit, very similar to what we just heard from the last group. But this aspect of the social justice and the inequity lens is an extension from those core functions. And so I mentioned that because if you do look at, and just give me 1 second, I will go back to those slides. If you do look at those first 4 slides, we talk about quality education, but and Maslow's hierarchy of needs came up in both some regional and interregional discussions we had, kind of how those things factor in. Well, you know, poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, those are tying into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If students don't have those things, they're not going to be able to really be effective in their educational processes, whether that be on campus, whether that be at home, or in other sort of dynamic issues that presented as a result of the pandemic and so forth. So I just want to sort of go back in because really there's several common threads that we found that resonated with our conversations. And again, that this connectedness, this piece is so vital. And I think that what we do as student affairs and services professionals to help highlight those connections with senior leaders on campus, with our colleagues, not just within student affairs, but across the institution, academic affairs, support units and other capacities. So they really understand that, you know, there's a lot more to this. We heard the students talking about creating a food bank the other day, and how that those processes in a virtual food bank were very important. And we know globally that the poverty levels have dropped significantly. Progressions in a lot of developing countries, you know, the middle classes, those have been set back 10 or 15 years. So what's that going to mean for our students, not just in the interim, but in a year, 2, 3 years down the line? When we have new students coming in, how's it going to impact enrollments? How's it going to impact, you know, the needs of those student populations? So that connective piece, I think, is a very important one, and it threads very well into the things that have already discussed by the previous, or by the I guess eastern half the way Andrea referred to it, the interregional discussion. So at this point, I'll send it over to my colleague, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Ted. So I think then here we would like to also talk a little bit about, you know, post-COVID and SDGs. So in our conversation as well, in the discussion, I'd like to give credit to the participant who brought up this point about, as we are starting to think ahead of what it might look like in the upcoming academic semester, academic year, really it's important to take the time and reflect on the things that happened during the past year, some of the knowledge that we gained, some of the lessons that we learned, some of the challenges that we faced through this pandemic, and really ask ourselves this question is, if I could go back in time, how might I respond differently? So I think this is such a great question that came up in the conversation in terms of, again, reminding us that if I could go back in time, some folks mentioned that, you know, I could have reached out to my colleagues in the region, or maybe like outside of my region, really learning about, you know, how they're dealing with the issues, because again, a lot of times that we're dealing with similar issues, but also different issues at the same time. But how can we, you know, share the resources and share the lesson that we learned, and learn about what other people are doing so we can better do our work. Yeah, so I think that was just one of the questions and theme that came up in the conversation.
And I'll just build on that quickly before we move to our final slide. And you know, I think a lot of and even in the chat, people are commenting on how we are connected, and you know, although the world is a vast spans, and I know a lot of us miss being able to be face to face. I know I do, and wish we were all in Toronto right now. And I'm sure David and his team, feel the same very strongly. But that even with the distance and the fact that we've had to use technology to sort of bridge those gaps, is the fact that we can learn from each other. Is the fact that what's happening in parts of Asia can help inform what's happening in Africa, or what's happening in Europe can help inform what's happening in the United States, or vice versa. And so I think the one that really comes to my mind, I just want to share, is that IASIS, we do a series of global webinars, and we did one last fall looking at issues of inequity. And Evelyn from the Philippines shared that what they really felt that they were dealing with from a strictly equitable standpoint was poverty, and how that really has impacted their students, even pre-pandemic. And so thinking about what that means and how we overcome issues of technology around the world, no matter what type of country that you are in, what the socioeconomic status may be of your student body, someone's going to be impacted by degrees of access, by degrees of privilege and economic factors. So understanding what the Philippines has been going through, what they're working through, can help inform colleagues elsewhere around the world. And even in the United States, I was working with a colleague working in K through 12 that was talking about how they were in a rural area and they couldn't get access, their students could not get access to the internet whatsoever. So it's not just a developing country issue. These are issues that we're facing in every single country around the world, and the ways that we support our students and the ways we try to continue to support and connect them. And adding the social justice lens, which is ever so important, that has even further been highlighted, adds additional challenges, I think, to the work that we try to do. So our last slide, I'll kind of get us going here. We'll wrap up in about 2 minutes, so we leave enough time for our closing. The first thing we want to just is this aspect of bringing students into the conversations. I applaud David and his team for having that student panel so we could hear their perspectives and learn a little bit about what they've been doing over the course of the past year. That their diverse perspectives, their diversity in general, how they link to the communities and how they help us, stay connected and stay grounded, I think maybe is an important way is important. And that leads to that next step, the second bullet item of needing a top-down and a bottom-up approach. A lot of us talked about kind of where do the SDGs come in? Are our institutions really dialed into them? A lot are not. A lot are saying that may be happening in the public sector. A lot of countries saying, well, we hear about this, but you don't really hear about it being something that's integrated. And so obviously, I think most of us would agree that we do need to do a better job of integrating it. But having a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach can be very healthy, as opposed to just one or the other. Hearing from students, understanding what's going on from a bottom approach can be great. It's very organic, but we have to bridge what's happening at those senior levels, senior leadership, management. They're looking at much broader issues quite often, especially in light of the pandemic, with financial issues, issues of pivoting and crisis management and so forth. So being able to look at those from both and connect those pieces is a huge role of, I think, what student affairs and services people around the world do to help facilitate these issues and help us to make sure that we're supporting our students and supporting our communities on a wider scale. Jia?
Yeah, and another point in terms of solution is, since mentioned earlier that maybe we're already doing the work, but we're just not using the language and definitions from SDGs. So one of the solutions is how can we draw correlations and align the language that we're already using with SDGs. So it's important to not only important for people to be exposed to SDGs, including students ourselves, but also higher level leaderships. And how can we use the language as well when our academic colleagues are already using it? So when that concept reaches student affairs, how can we embed ourselves as quickly as possible? So I think that's one of the other solutions that was also highlighted in the conversation.
And then point 4, very quickly, because the last group did a great job of highlighting how rankings are included. But one thing that really talked about was the purpose of rankings, whether they be looking at institutional rankings in the QS world, rankings, the Times rankings, the US News and World Report, but also the rankings of showing what this means for the SDGs. And what we talked about was the challenges of most people aren't aware of what goes into those rankings, the metrics behind them, because quite often they're very biased. Quite often they don't really address issues. One example I gave is that a ranking that came out for universities in the Middle East was and this is a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, was only based off faculty published research. So your research institutions, your larger institutions are going to clearly be at the top of those. Smaller institutions may not even know where to begin. And one of the people in our dialogue talked about the fact that they would like to get involved, but when they saw what the requirements were, they don't even see the value of them trying to submit information. So, keep realizing that what these rankings mean, the role of them, kind of how institutions may pivot to perform well in those rankings versus what's actually happening on the ground and how we're serving students and what those things mean. Definitely within an SDG concept of trying to integrate and get more people to be aware of the SDGs and connecting them to what we do day to day, or sort of that strategic planning piece. I think the previous interregional hub group mentioned very, very well. And then I'll pass it to Jia to finish our last point as we wrap up.
Yeah, so the final point in solutions is really important for leaderships in different institutions or organizations to consider how to integrate SDGs in our work. So it's important to get that buy-in from the higher level leadership, but also perhaps, as I see Akeem also mentioned in the chat as well, one of the solutions is to link the accreditation, other means of measurement or assessment with SDGs. So in that way, we are really holding ourselves accountable to meeting these goals. But also, it's at the same time also important for us to emphasize and highlight the value of our work, and to so that, so to speak, to the higher level leadership. So yeah, so I think we just want to highlight this last solution as well. And Tat, do you have anything else you want to add?
Just to kind of close this point, and Akeem's note in the chat is a great one, where he's talking about that if we do link the SDGs to accreditation, that does imply and does create a degree of responsibility by institutions. So I think that what I gathered from the conversations, and definitely the previous group's presentation, is that we need to find a way to make these more visible on our campuses, in our communities, so people are aware of them, and find ways to pull them in. The SDGs were intentionally made very broad, which I think scares a lot of people, because we're in a world of accountability. We're in a world of measurement and reporting, which all goes back to quality assurance and accreditation processes, whether we at the governmental or private levels. So being able to understand how we can fold these in so it's non-threatening to campuses, but we're also doing it in a way that is practical. We can say, look, here's what we're doing reasonably, I think is probably the best strategy moving forward. So we can have the space to use them to educate our future leaders, to educate our campus communities and so forth, but also be able to really be meaningful in the impact of what they can be on campus, and how we use them, both from an accountability perspective, but also one from a educational and a developmental one. So thank you all to everyone in both our interregional and our regional hubs, and we hope that we did a pretty good job of articulating what you shared. So thank you so much. Back to David.
Thank you.
Great, thank you both Tad and Jia. So I'd now actually like to invite Lisa and Birgit to provide some reflective comments and share next steps as outcomes from our discussions. So over to you, Lisa and Birgit.
Thank you, David. And I'm thrilled to offer a few remarks. What a great week. Sincerely, it went by fast. I don't know about you, but it went by really fast, but it was just a wonderful week. Just to give you a brief overcap to remind you what we've done, our process included moving from regional hubs to large hubs. We met 3 times as colleagues to take a deep dive into how the SDGs are embedded in the philosophy and aims for our work. We shared the inequities found through COVID-19 in our responses. Additionally, we just heard from the interregional presentations, and now we have some solutions to be champions for the 2030 agenda. The 23 pre-recorded sessions from our associations around the world and our practitioners demonstrate our commitment to overcome the inequities facing our institutions and our students. It was great to see how our associations are supporting practitioners during this extraordinary time. We enjoyed learning firsthand from our colleagues on how they are adopting the SDG framework. Lee opened the Global Hub reminding us we are one planet connected, and it's our moral and ethical responsibility to fight the inequities facing humanity. The UT Provost, Cheryl, offered excellent examples of how and why UT University of Toronto is embracing the SDGs. And we specifically learned about the Global Commons and had a mini session. Margaret, our keynote, reminded us not all universities are switched in, but they will. and the SDGs are more critical now than ever. In the end, the global and regional hubs, including the student panel, which I always enjoy, left us with aspiring ideals to consider as we move forward to advance the work of the SDGs for our institutions, local communities, and societies. This summit was part of a series of our focus to advance global, sustainable social justice. You could see our work that started in South Africa, where we spoke about the UNESCO medium-term goals for youth. Then in Chile in 2018, we prioritized the SDGs for our work. We identified key SDGs, and these SDGs we are focused on over the past few days. The overarching theme of the summits is that we enable networking that also enables us to think about how we can collaborate to advance the SDGs. I am hopeful you found the same in this summit. Before Birgit shares where we go from here, I want to stop and thank the Global Summit Planning Committee for a well-organized and thought-provoking summit. Let me start with David. Now, I'm not going to say this on every person, but David has been so persistent on making sure that this global summit happened. And he always wanted it to be around the SDGs. And I'm thrilled that he shared all the great work the University of Toronto is doing and Canada. I want to thank Mirella, Leanne, Rob, Birgit, and Akeem. I enjoyed working with them on planning. We could not have managed the regional and interregional hubs without the help of IAS's leadership team around the world. Latome and Tanya in South Africa, thank you. Andrea and Oceania. Adnan in Bahrain, Leanne in Greece, Abigail in the UA, Ja and Tad in the US, and Beverly in the Caribbean. A huge thank you to the University of Toronto for being a fantastic host, and Jennifer and Mark from Caucus for managing the registration process and more. It is indeed taken a village of passionate people to make this happen. Now I would turn it over to Birgit, whose passion for this topic is definitely contagious. So thank you, Birgit. I'll pass it on to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lisa. I want to join you in thanking our colleagues for the fantastic work done to make the summit possible. The work is done by volunteers, and that makes it even more special. So what now? Where to with all that we've learned over these past 2 days, 3 days? We've seen fantastic recorded presentations, heard from our colleagues, and have formed good networks with peers from right across the globe. And this is one aspect that sets the Global Summit apart from other conferences. We're a working space where we use the time to work together and form and deepen our global networks in student affairs. The action time after the summit is as important as the action time during the summit. And we've planned at least 4 actions. We will, as we've done with all past summits, generate an outcome document, a memorandum or manifesto, if you will. It's a summary of the event and the overall position we take. In this case, it's on the SDGs and how we seek to mobilize around these and deepen our commitment and work towards these shared goals, global goals. And we call on our higher education sector to be an active agent in achieving these. The second action we've planned is that we've been collaborating with UNESCO on publishing a global handbook on student affairs. And they've invited this report from the summit into the Global Handbook, published by UNESCO in Paris, and due to be book launched at the UNESCO World Health, World Higher Education Conference in 2022. A report of the summit will also be the basis for a publication at the University World News, which has invited us to submit a report. There are also conversations now amongst a few of us around doing a formal research project on the SDGs and how student affairs interfaces with them. A call of action to you here. We hope you formulate your own actions coming out of the summit. Shape your own relevant, realistic, impactful action going forward. Perhaps focus on one SDG, perhaps initiate one partnership, perhaps make one of your existing projects more impactful, or help students themselves become agents of change for social justice when they leave university, and expand the notions of social justice to the wider communities. Or whatever works for you in your context and makes the most sense for you in your local context. The main outcome, of course, is that you have developed a deeper knowledge of the SDGs and found deeper connectedness and resonance with this global framework for social justice. We hope you will align your work more explicitly and also form partnerships and collaborations around this framework. From my side, it was a joy to connect with you over these past days, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next Global Summit. And for this, I'm going to pass back to David. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Birgit and Lisa, for those comments. And I also just want to echo all the thanks and gratitude that has been shared, both in the chat and both from Lisa and Birgit. I also just want to additionally especially thank our Heart House team at the University of Toronto, which would have been the host location of the sessions if we were in person, but their troubleshooting and keeping us on track has been immensely appreciated to make sure that this event ran so smoothly. So thank you to them as well. So now I'd like to, as we're getting close to the wrap up of the session, I'd like to introduce Paul Moriarty to make an announcement for the next Global Summit on Student Affairs and Services. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, David. Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to meet you all at this summit. And I just want to echo the congratulations to our current hosts. Fantastic. And no pressure on us then. And we're delighted in Ireland. I'm the chair of Student Affairs Ireland, the representative body which supports professionals in student affairs and student services in Ireland. I am also director of the student experience in University College Cork, where we'll be hosting the next and the 6th Global Summit of Student Affairs and Student Services. I'm also Vice President of EXTA, which is the European Council of Student Affairs. So I suppose just for those of you that don't know where Cork is, it's at the very south of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and it's the 2nd city in Ireland. And I'll be showing you just a little video shortly, just to give you a sense of the place and of the university. So UCC, as we call it, University College Cork, was established in 1845, right in the middle of the Great Famine in Ireland, which is very, I think, poignant. And we have about 23,000 registered students there. So I know there's been some discussion about tables and rankings. I just suppose recently, because it's very, very relevant, we've been recently ranked 8th in the world in the higher education, Times Higher Education rankings in relation to our work on the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. So I am absolutely delighted to be welcoming you, and hopefully you'll all come to Cork. We're the land of 1,000 welcomes, Céad Míle Fáilte in our own language. And I really look forward to Student Affairs Ireland and UCC hosting the next summit. So now I'm just going to offer you a glimpse through a small video of University College Cork and Cork City. Thank you.
Questions and questions, well, I knew nothing. If I seemed different, hey, I never knew and never loved the ways of many men. I went underground as the wagons circle in on me. I and the walls of this old town were tumbling down. I was done, I was spent all by the shouting, but there were murmurs down below. Oh, I couldn't quell them, I couldn't quell them at all. It takes too much to get it right, it takes too much to get it right. From underneath this oversight, it takes too much to get it right, takes too much to get it right, it takes too much to get it right. From underneath this oversight, it takes too much to get it right, it takes too much to get it right, it takes too much to get it right, but it takes too much to get it right, it takes too much to get it right, it takes too much to change my mind, it takes too much to get it right, but it takes too much to get it right, it takes too much to get it right.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Paul. Beautiful video. And I saw a lot of excitement in the chat about booking tickets already. Really interesting to see the prospects about actually possibly being able to visit other places. So I do look forward to passing on the torch to you folks in Ireland. So we are now officially at the close of the 5th Global Summit on Student Affairs and Services. We will be sending out a follow-up email, which will include additional resources, including the recordings from the sessions that we've had throughout the past few days, and an assessment that we encourage you all to complete. Thank you for attending and contributing to our discussions. Looking forward to connecting with you all again. And in the meantime, I wish you all the best. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.